In this video, we're going to be upgrading my Onefinity CNC machine from the standard 65mm mount, which uses a regular trim router, to this new 80mm mount and spindle from Redline CNC. This is an upgrade kit that's sold and supported by Onefinity, so this is going to be an awesome upgrade, super easy to install. I want to bring you along for the process. I have been waiting quite a bit of time to get this thing installed, so let's get after it. I'm Jeff, you're watching Homebuilt Workshop. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Homebuilt Workshop. I hope all of you are doing awesome. If you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that several years ago, I installed the Onefinity CNC machine here in my little tiny workshop. Overall, I have zero complaints about that machine. In fact, it's been working really well. But a kit like this is exactly what I've been waiting for. Until now, you've had to sort of piece together your own kit with parts and pieces from different manufacturers. And overall, there's not really anything wrong with that. They work just fine. In fact, I have a friend with basically the same CNC machine as me, and his spindle setup, which is not this, is working perfectly. But when the overall upgrade kit right here from Redline was announced, I was super excited. I've had this kit sitting here in the shop for a little while now, and really, I just need to take the time, get it installed, so that's what we're doing today. I've got the box open here, but I've not taken anything out. Now, let's unbox this thing. We should have 3 boxes in here. This one I popped open earlier, but I haven't removed anything. This is like a bunch of brackets and things for mounting all of the parts. We've got another box here. That is going to be our control box. And then finally, we have one more. That's our spindle. There is one more piece that I'm going to need to make this conversion on my machine, and that is an upgraded spindle mount. My machine has a 65mm spindle mount, or router mount. We're going to an 80mm, so therefore I had to purchase an 80mm spindle mount. It's really kind of the same as what's on my machine now, but this mount here is 80mm, which will accept this spindle. So this is going to be the first thing that we need to install. Another reason I need to get this done is because I purchased this one as part of the IPP, or the Infinite Possibilities program through Onefinity. It's basically where you purchase a piece at a slightly reduced cost, but you do need to send in your old piece, kind of like a core charge. If you've ever bought something for your vehicle and you have to turn in the old part so it can be used as a core, this is kind of the same thing. You get a tiny bit of a discount on the price, but you do have a limited time to send those parts back to Onefinity. So I've got to send the 65mm mount from my machine back to them in this same box. So I got to make sure not to lose this box. That goes back to them. Let's head over to the machine, get this thing replaced. This disassembly process starts by unscrewing the little plastic clip that holds the cables in the top of my current Z slider. This will free up the cables so that we can pull everything else out of the way. Now I can loosen up the 2 Allen head screws that hold the router in place. With those loose, the router will slip right up out of the mount. Except here, I had it too high and it didn't have enough clearance to slip up out of there, so I had to lower it down. Then I could remove the router from the mount. Now I'll remove the 2 arms that hold the dust boot in place. If you weren't going to be changing out, say, a 65mm mount for an 80mm mount, and all you were doing was installing a spindle, you could leave these dust boot mounts right in place. This next piece to remove is the Z slider. This is the one that's getting upgraded in both the size of these sliders, but also from the 65mm mount to the 80mm mount. And this is the piece that I have to return as part of the upgrade program. This Z slider is held on by 4 screws. basically one at each corner. I'm going to break all 4 loose first before I remove them. Why? For no particular reason other than that seemed like a good idea. It is really important at this step to use the correct size Allen wrenches. I have heard of people breaking these or them getting seized in there and stripping out that head. So if you're not sure of the size, double check. Make sure you have the right one. For mine, this is a 3mm metric. That's what I'm using. It fits better than any other size that I have. I want to disconnect this motor. Now I can finish removing those screws and get this Z-slider out of our way. From here, I'm going to jump right into installing the new 80mm spindle mount. This is exactly the reverse process of removing the old one. After installing the top 2 bolts, I did have to manually raise the mount up so that I could access the lower bolts. When the mount is all the way down, they kind of sit over top of the lower bolts, so you need to raise it up to give you some room to get in there. Now I'll go back with my Allen wrench and tighten up these 4 bolts. Here I'm tightening them in a crisscross pattern just to make sure that everything centers up as I tighten it. Again, I don't know if that's necessary or not. That's just how I'm doing it, and it worked fine. And does it pass the shake test? That's not going anywhere. We've got the Z-slider in place. We're now ready to add the spindle. Let's take a quick look at the box and see what all comes in there and get this spindle installed. With our spindle, we have a couple wrenches here. These will be for changing out the bits. These actually are probably some of the nicest collet wrenches I have ever felt. They are heavy duty. They got a nice sort of a plasti dip style handle. Might be plasti dip, I don't know. It's really comfortable. And they're nice and thick. That is really cool. Those are some really good wrenches. I wish routers would come with wrenches that nice. Around the outside, we've got 4 different size collets. We have a 1/2 inch collet. We have a 3/8 collet. An 1/8 inch collet, that's cool. That's going to work great for those little teeny fret slot cutting blades. And this, probably the most common one, I would guess, is a 1/4 inch collet. Most of the bits that I have, actually all the bits I have, are either 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch. So now I have the ability to get some 1/2 inch as well as 3/8 inch shank bits. For now, these will be the main 2, 1/8 and 1/4. And then of course we have the actual spindle itself. If I can get it out of there. Ooh, that is heavy. Wow. Electrical connector there. Pretty straightforward, I think. This spindle does take any ER20 collets, so all of the collets that are here are ER20, and if there's other sizes available, an ER20 collet will work on this if there's any other ones you wanted to try to add. Let's drop this on the machine. After dropping the spindle into place, we'll tighten up the 2 screws that secure the spindle to the mount. With the spindle roughly in place and the new mount installed, we can now focus on the wiring, connecting the controller, all of that sort of thing. But first, we gotta unpack the rest of these boxes to find all the parts we need. Everything in this upgrade kit is packed really well. This is the controller that I'm trying to unwrap, and it's bubble wrapped really secure. They really did a good job in packaging this stuff for shipment. This is the bracket that holds the controller in place. I opted for the under table mount because I want this to be underneath where my machine sits. And this little bracket gets attached to the table, and then the controller kind of hooks into place and it's suspended by the bracket. It's kind of an interesting way to mount the controller. Now we just need some cables to make up all of these connections. But with everything unpacked, I can now confirm some of the rumors I heard before I even got to this step, and really part of the reason that I decided to make this video in the first place. I heard well before I unpacked any of this stuff that there's no instructions included, and you're kind of on your own. And I can say with 100% certainty, there are no instructions for absolutely anything. And like I said, that's why I decided to make this video, in hopes that by watching me work through the process, it helps you if you're trying to install the Redline Spindle Kit on your Onefinity machine. Moving right along, we have here the controller with the mounting plate that attaches this. I opted for the under table mount, so this little bracket, which slides on and off, will get attached underneath my work table. Then the controller will clip into that. We have this little display that can either be mounted on the controller or you can mount this remotely. I'm not 100% sure which way we're going to go yet, but it does come with cables for doing both. You see these two short cables here. There's an Ethernet style cable, and this little guy, we have a longer one of both of those right here. So these will be used only if you decide to mount this remotely, which I might do. I don't know. We'll see how everything kind of falls in place first. And if this isn't in a great spot under the table, I'll mount this remote. So that's what these two are for. They go with the little display. We have this heavy duty cable. This is what connects to the top of the spindle, and then we'll connect to our controller box. Next up, we have this cable, which has this breakout board connector on there. This will plug directly into the back of the Onefinity CNC machine controller. Now, my machine currently has the breakout board adapter connected to one of those remote power strips, so that my controller will turn the power strip on and off, which then in turn turns on the router. Since I'm not using the router or the breakout board adapter, that all gets replaced with this guy. This plugs in, the other end goes right to the controller for the Redline spindle. Finally, we've got just a regular power cord. So it should be pretty simple. The only thing I'm not 100% sure of yet is exactly where we're going to mount this. But I think the first thing is to kind of climb underneath my table and figure out where this is going to go. Now I'm pretty sure that this is probably going to be all but impossible for you to really see what's going on, but we're kind of underneath the table here, which also is shared by other household storage, so disregard that. What we're paying attention to is this little sliver of a black box you can see right here. This is the controller for the Onefinity machine, and also what we're going to be connecting the new Redline control box to. Now basically what we want to do is mount this up here somewhere, and actually I can tell already that this little remote control display is not going to work there. It's just not. By the time I mount this up under there, you can't even see the display. This is really hard to hold at the same time. There's just a little sliver of the display. So I believe we are going to mount that remotely using those longer included cables. And then it really doesn't matter where this gets mounted. The only thing we need to pay attention to is, can we access the ports for the other cables? As long as we can get to that, I think it's going to be fine. I believe that I'll be able to mount this something like that. Then we'll put the remote control someplace else. Then I can get to all the plugs on the back. We can route those cables up and around. It's going to be fine. Before we drop this controller into place on the bracket that we just installed, I want to connect a few of the cables to this just to get them connected. I think it's going to be easier to do it now. The tight quarters up under that table is going to make it a little bit tricky to do. So we're going to make a few connections now. Plus, I think I do want to run this little display here remotely. So we're going to remove these short cables that we just connected, and using these longer ones, that'll allow us to find a good spot to mount this up above the table somewhere. The first thing I want to do is install this fuse in the back. Now, I don't really know why their fuse is separate, but it is, and we need to install that because if that's not in place, it's not going to work. So we'll install that into the fuse holder. Good to go there. Now I'm going to disconnect this remote display that I have temporarily mounted to the side of the control box. Now I was certain that I filmed me connecting this initially, but that footage is non-existent, so I guess I didn't. But really, there's two small Allen screws on the side of the control box that hold this display in place. Then there's a very short Ethernet style cable, as well as another short cable that plug into two very clear ports on the side of the controller. There's no way you can mix these up, they just plug in there, and then the remote display gets screwed on to the side of the control box. Since I'm going to be using this display remotely or not connected to the control box, I'm going to remove these two short cables and use the included longer cables to plug into the exact same spots on both the back of the remote display as well as on the control box. This will give me a lot of length and a lot of options as far as mounting this controller in a spot where it's more visible than buried underneath the table. If you're mounting your control box in a spot where having the display attached to the controller works for you, that's perfectly fine. You won't have to worry about swapping it around. But I do think it's super cool that they included these longer cables for just these sorts of applications. Now I have all of the connections made on the control box. Now we can climb back under the table and get this box mounted into place. And now for the fun part, trying to organize these wires in a way that makes some kind of sense. I guess there's not really a right or wrong way, and your setup is going to vary. This wire will just get passed up here, and we'll get that connected to the spindle here in a minute. Now I have the wire with this connector on there. We're going to remove the breakout board adapter that I've been using to turn on my router and plug this in its place. It is going to be impossible to show you what I'm doing because, well, it's right there. I can barely see it myself. But if you've got one of these controllers, again, this is the Buildbotics controller, you've got this DB25 port on the back. This connector goes into that. If you're using the breakout board adapter like I am, then you're going to have to remove that, and this gets plugged in place. I want to have some serious cable routing to clean up, but I've got that breakout connector connected for the controller. I think all of our connections are made down here except for the display, which we'll get to in just a moment. And now we're back on the top side of our CNC work table. It's time to make the connection from the control box to the spindle. This is that heavy-duty screw-in-place connector. You can't mess it up. It just attaches right to the top of the spindle. Just make sure that it's screwed in completely. And now we can wrap up this portion of the spindle conversion by reinstalling that plastic cable clip that we removed very first in this video. I decided that I'd mount this little remote display right here on the wall. It's really easy to access for whatever adjustments or settings I might need to change. So I've made the connections from this little external display back down to the control box. And I think right now, while we still have a whole lot of tidying up to do, a lot of cable management and that sort of thing, I think the basic upgrade is complete. And we're at a point now where we can actually fire this up and make sure that everything's going to operate. I've got the power connected to the controllers. I've got the spindle connected to the box. The motor for the new Z slider is connected. Everything's connected. I've triple checked to make sure that everything's all reconnected correctly. Let's go ahead and fire this up. See what happens. Here's under the table. You can see the two control boxes. This is the controller for the CNC. Power that up. And this is the controller for our new upgraded Redline spindle. We got a button right here on the side. Power that up. We'll wait for the machine to boot up and we'll see what happens here. Look at our display. We got some numbers at least showing. I don't know why it's blinking or anything just yet, but it's doing stuff, so we know that's connected correctly. Now we need to head into the control software and make a couple of adjustments there. To make sure this is going to operate correctly, we need to make a couple of changes. Down here in the tool section, we need to change our tool configuration from the router to this Redline VFD. That's going to open up a bunch of other settings. I'm not sure yet if we're going to need to make any changes here. I'm going to leave this as is for right now. Make sure we save that. If for some reason you don't see this Redline VFD option, you may need to upgrade the firmware of your machine to one of the later versions that does include the Redline. You can see up here that I actually have another upgrade available right now. I'm not going to do that at the moment. We'll worry about that later. For the next setting, we need to go down here to this admin section under the General tab. And we're going to go to this configuration. Now, I had to figure this out off camera because I didn't realize this is how it worked. But once you go in there, after you've changed this, we need to let the machine know that we no longer have the Z16 Z-axis. Now, this is only applicable if you upgrade to the Z20 like I did. In order to tell the machine that you now have a Z20, you have to go to this reset configuration, and that's going to bring up another option for you to select the Z20. If you're still on a Z16, even if you changed spindle sizes, I don't think you need to mess with it. But if you go from a 16 to a 20, like I did, you've got to change that configuration. Once you make those changes, you want to make sure to hit the save button, and then you're ready to go back to your control surface where you can test out your newly upgraded machine. Now we can scroll down to this MDI section here. And in the MDI section, this allows us to enter in manually some G-code. We're just going to do a simple M3 command to tell the spindle to turn on. So M3 is the command to start. So we're going to say M3 S, I don't know, let's just say 13,000. So that tells the spindle to turn on at 13,000 RPM. And then we can just hit play. And there we go, our spindle is on. You can see on here, this tells the RPM. We're at 12,950, so this is showing about 50 RPM too low, but close enough to 13,000 RPM. Super cool to have that speed controlled by whatever's set in the file. Another thing we can do is press this button on the side, which puts this in a manual mode. From there, you can turn it on using the start and stop buttons and then manually adjust this. It's actually pretty cool because one of the advantages of a spindle is everybody says they're so much quieter. And yes, we're not running at complete full speed, but I'm able to talk over the sound, and it's not all that bad. I would still probably wear hearing protection when the machine's running, but overall the sound of just a spindle is a lot less, and that's pretty cool. Let's shut this down. We'll just hit the stop button. Overall, this process of upgrading to both the Z20 Z slider as well as the 80mm spindle was really simple. The Redline kit was really well thought out. All of the connections are there, everything's included, but there's a couple things that I didn't know until I know. And these are some things that it would have been nice to know ahead of time had there been some sort of documentation. The first thing that would have been nice to know is when you go into the configuration to change the settings from the Z16 to the Z20 slider, well, one thing that they don't tell you is once you do that, you're going to lose all of your jobs that are in your machine. Any of your G-codes that you have stored in there, maybe stuff that you run day in, day out, or occasionally, whatever jobs are in that machine are going to get wiped out when you do that. That's probably the biggest thing that was super annoying and really quite frustrating for me. I didn't realize that was going to happen, and I had to go back and reload a lot of my jobs. Now, thankfully, I have them stored elsewhere, so it wasn't a huge deal, but man, it would have been nice to know that ahead of time, had there been some sort of documentation or even a warning or something. I just wish that I knew that up front before pressing that button. I didn't know until after it was done and all of my jobs were gone. The second thing that would have been really nice to know, and now that I understand it, it does make sense, but it was kind of frustrating, is the fact that once you go from the 65mm spindle to the 80mm spindle, it's going to change where your center point of your machine is, because the 65mm spindle is closer in, and since this is bigger, of course it's going to change where that bit lands. It only makes sense. Bigger spindle, it's going to push that bit out. Well, what that ended up doing was it moved basically where your wasteboard should be about an inch. Mine now comes out about an inch farther than where it used to, and it doesn't go back quite as far as it used to either. Again, this makes sense, but the downside is I've got some jobs on my machine that rely on a certain position on my wasteboard, pinning a guitar in place, for example. Well, those dowel pin holes are now not going to be in the same spot, because if I try to run that G-code, it's going to go where it used to go, but since the spindle is out about an inch or so farther than it used to be, it's not going to cut in the same spot. That really kind of stinks, because now I have to rerun those, make sure everything's positioned properly. Again, it's not super hard, it's just really time consuming, and I just wish that I'd have thought of that up front. It's just not something that was included anywhere, and not something I ever even gave a thought to. So really, those two things were probably the biggest inconveniences. Like I said, the wasteboard thing, that's probably a bit time consuming too, because, well, I'm going to have to make a new wasteboard with all new dowel pin holes that reflect the position of this larger spindle. But hopefully by sharing those two things with you, hopefully it avoids a little bit of frustration and helps you out during your upgrade. I'm not saying the upgrade's not worth it, just if I'd have known those two things ahead of time, that'd have been a lot less frustrating. And I think that's going to wrap up the upgrade of my X50 Onefinity CNC machine with the BuildBotics controller to one of the new Redline Spindle kits that are now available through Onefinity. Again, none of this is sponsored. I purchased my CNC machine. I purchased all the bits, accessories, parts, upgrades, all of that myself. I get nothing by promoting any of this stuff. I just wanted to share the process in case you have a machine like this and you want to upgrade it yourself. I still have quite a bit of work to do though, because I've got all of this cable management to get tidied up, get everything organized again, but that's going to vary between my setup and your setup depending on how your machine is laid out. Mine's pretty tricky because I don't have a lot of space here to get around things, so I'm going to spend the next probably couple of hours really tidying things up, getting things tied out of the way and all that sort of stuff. But the upgrade, bam, complete. Having this upgrade is going to be great because now we have variable speed. Before it was really just the wheel on the router, kind of set it to wherever it needed to be. Now we can use all of that information that's in the G-code. We can set all of the speeds and feeds, and this is going to control it automatically. Awesome. I'm going to get to work and get this place tidied up. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, hit that thumbs up, hype the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time. Oh boy. This is gonna be a lot of work. Cool to have done. But man, now I gotta tie up all these wires and get everything. Dust collection, I gotta connect that back on there too. Better get after it. Where's those zip ties?